George was relieved that the candles had lasted so long. Without their light, they wouldn't have been able to find the children so easily in the dark. When they reached the mice's house, George bade them farewell. The house was far too small for a stag, and he was also very tired. After saying goodbye, the mice had dinner and went to bed. When Lars and Jess had brushed their teeth and crawled under their warm blankets, Granny Mouse assured them that she wasn't angry any more. She was just happy to have them back, safe and sound. The children had to promise their grandmother not to run away again. Then she tucked them in and put the lights out. And shortly after, both little mice fell asleep. Their granny waited for a while, listening to Jess mumble in his sleep. He already seemed to be dreaming. The old lady went downstairs, and later, sitting in her armchair, she looked around her. On a cupboard stood pictures of her children and grandchildren. One showed a girl mouse and her husband. Next to them lay the shiny acorn carved with George's image. George was probably at home now, Mrs. Mouse thought, also probably recovering from a tiring evening. She greatly appreciated the stag's help in finding the little ones, and after a while, Mrs. Mouse fell asleep in her armchair. In every forest there is a tree, the first tree in the whole forest, so old it knows almost everything, with roots deep in every corner of the forest, even in the realm of our thoughts and dreams. Seventh story. When the animals wanted to drive a stranger out of their woods, but found a friend instead. Spitzweg the marmot was a wanderer. His current journey was coming to an end, since just a few steps separated him from home. Just a few steps till he set foot in his beloved Mousewood again. Spitzweg had travelled far. He had seen the sea and the mountains. He had rafted rivers, taken trains, and met many animals, even making friends in places where people welcomed him in foreign languages. All this just proved him right, he thought to himself. A friendly fellow is welcome everywhere. Marmots, by the way, are small animals which are similar to mice or squirrels, but which are, in fact, marmots. Spitzweg turned to the dirt track he'd walked as a kid on the way to school. Today the track seemed so much narrower. The marmot was looking forward to putting his rucksack down and his feet up when he got home. But he was not quite there yet. Suddenly the ground beneath Spitzweg began to shake. At first the wanderer thought it was an earthquake, as he had experienced on his travels. Then he remembered there were no earthquakes in Mousewood. If the earth shook here, there was only one explanation. And indeed, suddenly about 20 wild boar crashed out of the dense undergrowth and stampeded past him, blazing a trail through the forest. At first glance it looked as though they did so recklessly, flattening everything in their path. A keener observer, however, could see they were extraordinarily careful, and had a keen eye for their surroundings, even though they were en route to their favourite wallow. This became clear when one of the hogs noticed Spitzweg. He broke away from his fellow boars, ran a curve, and approached the wayfaring marmot at hog speed. "Are my eyes playing tricks on me again?" he grunted loudly. "No, big fella, they aren't," Spitzweg said to the tusker. "Spitzweg!" he called and squealed so loudly one would have been forgiven for trembling in fear. "Welcome home!" This was music to Spitzweg's ears. Coming home always feels good, but it feels even better if someone welcomes you, especially if it's a good friend like Fiddler the boar. Fiddler was of impressive size, so impressive, in fact, that no one dared take his chances with this hulk of a hog. As a piglet he had often been mocked, without the other children needing a particular reason. He was just a piglet, a pushover. But Spitzweg had looked after Fiddler, and so they had long been good friends. "How are you? How was your journey?" asked the boar. "Good," replied Spitzweg. "So many stories to tell. But I'm heading home first. Sleep is the reward for staying up all day, and I think I'm going to collect my share." "You should get some rest then," Fiddler grunted. "Good to have you back." "It's good to be back," said the Marmot, amicably patting the boar's bristles and raising some dust. They walked some way down the path when a sudden noise startled them, a human noise. Spitzweg and his friends hid in the bushes at the wayside. Humans tend to get nervous if they come across wild hogs or marmots, and you never know what a nervous human will get up to. So animals prefer to keep some distance between them and humans, as at least the rarer specimens inevitably make humans extra nervous. The human roaming nearby, however, didn't seem one of the nervous kind. He was trying to whistle a tune. It wasn't quite clear what song it was supposed to be. Whistling obviously wasn't one of his strong points. The young man looked to the left and right as he passed the bushes where Spitzweg and Fiddler were hiding. "Reminds me of my brother," Fiddler whispered. The hog didn't say this because of a physical resemblance, but because his whistling sounded very much like Fiddler's brother. Suddenly, out of the blue, a chestnut hit the young man on the back of the head. "Hey!" he said, looking around. But since there was no one to be seen, he thought the chestnut had just fallen from one of the trees. He didn't realize there were only beech trees growing around him, and very rarely do chestnuts drop from beech trees. Then, just as the young man wanted to stroll on, the beeches seemed eager to make some more exceptions. Pock, pock, pock! A volley of chestnuts and acorns hit him on the back and head. That started to make the human nervous. He tried to duck and dodge, but, clumsy as humans are, he staggered, fell full length on the ground, and lay there, out for the count. Pock! Another acorn hit him on the head. "Give him a break, I think he's had enough," someone shouted from above. As the human was no longer something to be feared, and they wanted to know what was going on, Spitzweg and Fiddler left their hiding place. 3 young weasels climbed down the trunk of a beech tree and cautiously approached the unconscious man. All 3 had shoulder bags packed with chestnuts. From behind a nearby tree, Humbert the mouse also came out of hiding, his sister Tina clinging to his hand. His mother had once again made him babysit his little sister. He wasn't too keen on that, as he then had to take her into account when planning his adventures. "What are you up to, boys?" Spitzweg asked the weasels. "Who wants to know?" the tallest of the weasel boys asked. "My friend and I do," Fiddler grunted, growling and clawing the ground. This made an impression on the weasels. It even made them flinch. Little Humbert, however, seemed not so easily impressed. He faced Fiddler and the Marmot. His sister wanted to befriend the brawny boar and tried to go over to him, but her brother kept a tight grip on her hand. "We just wanted to chase away that human," Humbert explained. "I see," Spitzweg said with arms folded. "He didn't get very far, did he?" He approached the human and put his hands on the man's body. He felt his chest rise and fall. He seemed all right, considering he'd been scared unconscious. He'd be back on his feet soon enough. "Humans don't belong in our woods," said one of the weasels. Spitzweg looked at him blankly. "Humans don't belong here?" he asked. "You know what humans are like," replied the weasel. "They trample through our forest, disturbing the peace," said another weasel. The third weasel nodded frantically in approval and said, "Right, they disturb the peace." "They come here and think they can do as they please," the first weasel added. "We must put a stop to it. We must finally put a stop to it." "A stop to it," said Humbert's little sister, smiling brightly at her new friend Fiddler, proud she had repeated the sentence so well, even though she didn't actually know what it meant. "What exactly did that human do to you? Did he whistle too loudly?" Spitzweg asked, as he couldn't stand it when someone was harassed, especially if they hadn't done anything wrong. Even if that someone was a roughly 6-foot-tall human who stumbled over his own feet and couldn't whistle properly. Well, he hadn't done anything yet, admitted one of the weasels. Maybe not, the second weasel intervened, but only because we didn't give him the chance. 5 minutes later, he might have stomped through somebody's garden or grabbed your neighbour because he needed a warm hat for winter. Right, the third weasel confirmed, a hat. I've heard of humans doing such things, Humbert said all-knowingly. You know how humans are. Humans leave their litter wherever they go. They pick flowers and gather mushrooms from our clearings, and then they go home again. Right, said all three weasels simultaneously. So you think all humans are like that? Asked Spitzweg. Of course. It's always the same with them. I dare you to say otherwise, said one of the weasels belligerently. You're a cheeky chappy, aren't you? Growled Fiddler, looking fiercely at the weasel. I'm sorry, the weasel whispered meekly. Tina giggled, as she found his fierce face quite amusing. You know, I've been to many places during the last couple of years. Up in the north I was even attacked by an albino penguin. Believe me, it's not always the same with humans, said Spitzweg, pointing at the young man lying on the ground. If you think all humans are alike, you might as well say all mice are alike. He looked at Humbert. Well, we may look similar, the young mouse admitted, but we're not all alike. My Uncle Henry, for example, he's different. He's a gardener and he talks to his ivy. There you are, said the marmot. There certainly are humans who are gardeners, just like your uncle is. Some humans may on occasion disturb the peace and misbehave. But if somebody strolls through the forest whistling, that's no reason to chase him away. Whistling is not a crime. Robins whistle too, Humbert admitted. My brother whistles, Fiddler remembered. The wind whistles when it blows through the hole in my wall, one of the weasels said. The other two looked at him inquisitively. Really, just like someone who was whistling, explained the weasel. Whistling or not, yelled one of the other weasels, you can't compare humans to animals. They don't belong in the forest. They should stay where they belong. They should just leave us alone. You want the humans to leave us alone? Asked the marmot. If the humans knew you were throwing chestnuts at ramblers, you can imagine it wouldn't be peaceful here for very long. We don't like getting hit by chestnuts either, do we, boys? Added Fiddler the boar. Humans aren't all the same, apart from the fact they don't like being hit by chestnuts, and in that they're no different from us animals, Spitzweg said, and faced the young man. Just look at him. Doesn't he look peaceful? The animals fell silent. They listened to the humans breathing. Humans even benefit the forest, Spitzweg said calmly. They wander our woods and collect acorns, beechnuts and chestnuts. And when they dispose of the seeds, maybe a new tree grows there. A new forest could even grow in another place. Humbert, who was easily persuaded by scientific explanations, approved. Sounds reasonable, he said. As long as they don't do anything unfriendly, we can consider them our friends, Spitzweg concluded. The weasels liked the idea of having a giant as a friend, so they had a pretty bad conscience for treating the man so harshly, even though they would never have admitted it. They put down their chestnut-filled shoulder bags. One of them cautiously walked over to the unconscious human and put a chestnut into one of his jacket pockets, as a sign of friendship, and in the hope that the human would throw it away where the humans lived, where there weren't so many lovely trees as in Mousewood. The human started mumbling and sighing in his sleep. The animals couldn't quite get what he was saying, but it sounded something like, "Where's the deck of cards?" The weasels looked at Spitzweg as they believed he knew what the human was talking about. But the marmot just shrugged. Humbert's little sister let go of her brother's hand and ran over to the slumbering visitor. "Tired?" she asked, and touched the huge human's nose with her small paw. That seemed to tickle the unconscious man. He suddenly started moving. Humbert took his sister's hand, and the animals swiftly retreated to the bushes at the roadside. From there they watched the man regain consciousness. He smacked his lips, scratched his nose, and opened his eyes. "Look, he's awake. Can you see him looking around?" Spitzweg asked the youngsters. "Yes," said Humbert, watching excitedly, as the human first supported himself with his hands and then struggled to his feet and stretched to full size again. What imposing creatures those humans were! Of course you had to be careful with them, since they could possibly become erratic. But watching a wild human was truly a unique experience. The young man got up and dusted himself down. He wondered what had happened and why he'd woken up on the ground. Finally, he accepted the idea he had tripped over, the thought that clearly embarrassed him. He looked around to make sure no one had witnessed his misfortune. But there were no humans or animals to be seen. So he relaxed and started whistling again. Just as he was about to walk on, he discovered something in his pocket. "Look, he's found my chestnut," one of the weasels said. "And he's looking at it very closely. He seems to like it, doesn't he?" one of the other weasels commented. The human turned the chestnut over in his palm and obviously found it a lovely chestnut. He put it back in his pocket and took it along with him. Then the animal's new friend wandered off down the forest track, whistling. The animals watched him disappear, and little Tina waved to him. "Goodbye," she said. "How come you know so much about humans?" one of the weasels asked Spitzweg. "I've learned many things about them on my journeys," he answered. "But I've also seen a lot of animals that would seem strange to most people in Mousewood." "Have you seen a tapir?" one of the weasels wanted to know. "Indeed, I saw one in a park in the city," Spitzweg replied. "They've got stripes, haven't they?" another weasel inquired. "The tapir I met didn't have any stripes," Spitzweg said. "I always thought tapirs had stripes, at least 2 or 3 on their backs," the weasel said, pondering. "There may be tapirs with stripes. It's possible," the wayfaring marmot admitted. "I had stripes when I was little," Fiddler the Boar said. "Uncle Henry has stripes too," added Humbert. Then he bade the others goodbye, as he had to take his little sister home. It was already past noon, and both had to be back for lunch. Little Tina said goodbye to the large boar and walked off with her brother. A few quick goodbyes later, the weasels left as well. All 3 of them were still a bit upset, having been taught a lesson by the marmot and his brawny friend. But in the end, the marmot was right. "Sleep is the reward for staying up all day, and I think I'm going to collect my share," Spitzweg said again to his friend the boar. "Then go and get your well-earned rest," grunted his tusky friend. They walked to the marmot's home near Buttercup Meadows and agreed to meet later that evening and enjoy some pints of blue juice. Because blue juice was unique to Mousewood. Spitzweg unlocked the door and stepped into his shady house, the home he had been so far away from for so long. Finally the marmot could leave his heavy rucksack on the floor and fall onto his cosy couch. The young man, meanwhile, had reached his family's house and was about to let himself in. Then he remembered the chestnut in his pocket. The human looked at the shiny red-brown chestnut from Mousewood. Not knowing what else to do with it, he tossed it into one of the flower beds in the garden. Maybe he had a hunch that that was just the right place for it. 8th story. Last but not least, a wizard proven right, and a badger finishes his work. Ludwig Mole sat at his new desk, looking through his thick spectacles at the letter he had written so very carefully. He'd reread the lines several times now, just as carefully as he had written them, to make sure he hadn't misspelt anything. The mole was no seasoned writer. Back in the old days he had occasionally written his wife long letters. That was many years ago, but his wife still saw the bold writer of days long gone in him, so she took every opportunity to remind her husband of his talents. She had a soft spot for talented animals, That's why she was also the head of the Mousewood Art Society, organising exhibitions and readings every second Thursday, featuring paintings and poems by Mousewood's resident artists. If there was an exhibition or reading scheduled, letters had to be sent to all members of the society, and Ludwig had to write those letters. Admittedly, his new desk did make the work actually more convenient. This letter, however, was especially important. Ludwig got up from his chair, took the letter and walked over to the massive wooden door leading from his study to the hallway. If he had employed a secretary, this is where she would have sat, typing on her typewriter. But Ludwig didn't have a secretary. What he did have, however, was a kind neighbour who helped him write the letters. Nicholas the lizard sat in the hallway, his slouch hat in his hands. As Ludwig entered, Nicholas rose, straightening his jacket. "Good-day," Nicholas said. "My wife asked you to assist me, didn't she?" Ludwig asked, squinting because the lizard was too slim to be seen properly by a mole. "She certainly did." "Jolly good. Well, here's the text," Ludwig said, offering the sheet of paper to the hat stand, which did have a slight resemblance to Nicholas. The lizard shuffled over to the mole, took the sheet from his hands and looked at it. Then Mrs. Mole came in, happy to find Nicholas and her Ludwig getting along. She liked companionable animals. "Ludwig, have you written the letter?" she asked. She saw the sheet of paper and yanked it out of the lizard's hands, since she was in a hurry. "Splendid, Ludwig," she called out, skimming through the text before giving Nicholas the letter back. Then she pushed both men through the door into the study and said, "Now the two of you copy this text till we have enough letters, one for every resident of Mousewood. Hurry up, and please, in your best handwriting." Then she closed the door. The lizard and the mole started to write the invitations. 2 days later, a postman came by to pick up the letters and take them to the post office. As a tired Nicholas and an overwrought Ludwig handed him the bundle, he could have sworn both of them had been close friends for years and years. In fact, it had only been 2 days. The following Thursday, the beaver, head of the post office beside the stream, was sorting parcels by address and addressee at his huge sorting desk. The water wheel clattered as the rivulet made its babbling way downstream, when suddenly the post office door opened and the wizard entered. As he crossed the old wooden floor, one couldn't be sure if it was the wood or the old man's bones that were creaking. As usual, the wizard had come to bother the beaver with the same question he'd been asking for weeks. The old man cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Master Beaver, but is there any post for me?" he asked politely. The beaver stared at the wizard in disbelief. For an instant he thought it was just the wizard's strange sense of humour. Then he considered the possibility that the wizard himself could have gone a bit strange due to his incredible age. He looked into the wizard's eyes, wondering how old he might be. "Master Beaver?" the wizard said, not sure if he had already asked for his post or not. Not because he was old and forgetful, but because the beaver hadn't responded. "As I've already told you, we deliver post directly to your home, and nothing has been forgotten," the beaver reassured him. And if he'd been taller, he might even have patted the old man on the back to comfort him. "There is definitely post for me," the wizard said with conviction. "Haven't we discussed this already?" asked the beaver. Since it was too complicated to explain why he hadn't actually been mistaken, not even the first time, the wizard didn't waste time explaining. But he didn't give in either. "Listen. All the residents of Mousewood have had post in recent days, each and every one. Only my letter seems to be missing," said the wizard. "I delivered my own post just yesterday," the beaver said, "but I haven't had time to read it yet. You should maybe check your post box thoroughly. You may find your letter." Slowly but surely the wizard was getting impatient. He had already checked his own post box to such a degree He was worried he had overdone it. So the bearded man opened the wooden case he carried on his shoulder and took out his magic wand. In fact, a real wizard doesn't need a wand to cast spells, but by using his wand he could demonstrate to the beaver there was magic involved. Silence and focus were now essential. The wizard waved his wand. Magic sparks zapped through the air, glistening in iridescent colours. The wizard then murmured magic words in a language long forgotten. Roughly translated, it meant, "Watch out! There is magic about to happen, and you never know with magic, so don't complain or anything." Then he pointed the wand into the room, and a short burst of lightning shot out of the tip and, with a sizzle, hit the cupboard on the wall by the sorting desk. This literally breathed life into the cupboard, and it started to lumber towards the wizard and the beaver on short wooden legs. The wizard seemed even more startled than the beaver. Luckily, the march of the furniture came to a halt a moment later. By the wall, where the massive cupboard had until that moment stood, lay a letter on the floor. It must have fallen off the desk. The beaver picked up the envelope and read the address. To the wizard, Mousewood. The old man opened the envelope and skimmed the contents. Dear friends and neighbours, the Mousewood Art Society is happy to invite you to a very special occasion. Next Thursday, one of Mousewood's great artists will exhibit his paintings to the public for the first time. These works, created over recent years, depict the forest and its residents in the most diverse situations and circumstances. You may even discover yourself in the paintings of this extraordinary artist, and you will certainly see the forest from a new perspective. We look forward to welcoming you next Thursday at Marigold Meadows. Best wishes, the Mousewood Art Society. The wizard gave the letter back to the beaver. The latter pondered a while, since he wasn't sure if he was allowed to read it. After all, it wasn't addressed to him. Deep down, of course, the beaver knew one shouldn't read foreign post. But since this letter was addressed to all residents of Mousewood, and his own letter waited unread at home, and it was okay with the wizard, he read it anyway. "That's today, isn't it?" said the beaver. "Right now, to be precise," replied the wizard. "Can we make it in time?" asked the beaver. The wizard's eyes flashed. They flashed with the same magic that had moved the cupboard, and was now, with a bit of luck and focus, to get them to Marigold Meadows in time. "We can," the wizard said confidently. The beaver and the wizard left the post office, and after the beaver had locked the door, the wizard lifted him onto his shoulders. Then the old man focused intensely, channeling magic powers. He hadn't done that in quite a while, so he wasn't sure if it would work. But then it happened. The wizard was no longer standing on solid ground, but instead floating a good 5 inches above it. The beaver hung on tight to the wizard's collar as the old man accelerated, going faster and faster until he was racing at high speed along the dusty tracks leading to Mousewood, with the beaver still clinging to his shoulder. It was quite a sight. The wizard stood upright and unmoving, yet gliding fast, raising clouds of dust behind him as his white beard fluttered in the wind. As the wizard and the beaver headed towards Mousewood, they flew over a small animal with a bushy auburn tail and beady black eyes as it popped out of the bushes. It was Edward the squirrel. Edward had gone missing a few days previously during a practice session of popping out from behind something. The squirrel had used the time to think about his life, acorns and nuts. Seeing him, the wizard broke his stride, swaying in mid-air like a buoy in a choppy sea. "Edward, what are you still doing here?" the beaver asked the squirrel from the wizard's shoulder. "Why, hello," Edward said. "Have I missed something?" "We're in a hurry," the wizard said, "and you are invited." As he spoke, the old man tapped the wooden case strapped to his right side with his left hand. Edward needed no further explanation. Swiftly he climbed up the wizard's leg, leapt onto the wooden case, and held tight to the leather straps. The wizard went back a few paces and then took off over the forest track again at high speed.